All right, so what is ADO? ADO is Anaplan's data orchestrator that allows organizations to manage their data from source systems all the way into the Anaplan models. Now, how does ADO do this? It all starts with our no-code pre-built connectors that allow us to connect to our various source systems. We're also able to connect to flat files as well as Anaplan models as well. So once we've made that connection, we can store the data in ADO for use with future planning. Now, once we've stored that data, we're then able to do transformations on that data because the source data does not always match the format needed with our different Anaplan models. So in here, we're going to be able to do things like add columns and calculations, aggregations, things of that nature. Now, once we've created that transformation, we're then able to map that directly to different objects within our Anaplan models, things like modules, lists, and hierarchies. And ADO is the only system that really understands the underlying structure of our Anaplan models. Then once we've mapped where that data is going, we can then disseminate to our different models. This can be either, a variety of ways, either whether it be a manual push from ADO, a button on a dashboard, or we can manage this through workflow as well, where we could set up things like schedulers where we can schedule when we want to move that data. Now, some of the benefits our customers can expect through ADO, the first one is around driving trust in the data. So often our customers, when they see a number or a data item within an Anaplan model, it's not always easy to trace it back to the source to see where that data came from. And we'll see this in the demo today, where ADO creates a map showing us from source system all the way into our model, all of the steps that that data took to go from that source. Now, the second one's going to be around automating data processes. You're going to see once we create a transformation, this can be reused over and over again. So think actuals, where once we create that transformation for our actuals, as new actuals roll in, we don't need to recreate the transformation. We can push it through the same transformation and just save on redoing work over and over again. You'll also see here, our transformations are going to be no code. So leveraging Excel or Anaplan-like formulas, we're going to be able to transform that data where we don't need SQL or Python skills to do this. It's just reducing that overall reliance on IT. Last but not least is just being able to view all of our data in one place. Think of an organization where we have multiple ways of getting data into models across multitude of models and data sources. Just being able to view all of this and manage it all in one place is going to reap benefits for organizations using ADO. Okay, so let's take a look at our demo for today. So our demo today is really centered around responding to a change within an organization. So you can see here we have an organization that are currently operating in the Americas as well as Europe. And they have two different source systems here, two different ERPs where they're taking their actuals into ADO, transforming it, and then pushing it into their various models. Now, this organization acquires another company that operates within Asia Pacific. So again, we need to be able to do the same. We need to be able to take their data coming from a different ERP, move the actuals into ADO, transform it, and then push it into our individual models. So let's take a look at this dashboard. So this is a typical dashboard you would see within Anaplan. So you can see here, here's our hierarchy. We have our different regions with the locations rolling into them. So we need to add Asia Pacific as well as the different locations rolling in. As well as once we do that, we're then going to bring in our actuals here for April. Now, one thing I'm going to remind you of is that it really doesn't matter what hierarchy we need to create or update, as well as what data. This could be new products, this could be employees, anything of that nature. It's going to follow a near identical set of steps going from source all the way into our models. So here's our problem with today. You can see here, the Americas as well as Europe, they have their chart of accounts standardized. They're all in the exact same format. But the problem is with Asia Pacific, it's in a different format. It hasn't been standardized. You can see the extra dash here, where we'll have to perform a transformation in order to get this into a good format to push into our models. Now, as I mentioned earlier, the steps are going to be very, very similar or almost identical anytime we're moving data from a source into a model. So the first step is going to be, we're going to register that data. We're going to be able to connect that data, either connect to an Anaplan model, a flat file, or using one of our connectors, connect directly to a source system. Then once we've brought that data into ADO, this is where we're going to be able to perform the transformations, right? This is where we're going to be able to, things like add columns, aggregations, things of that nature. We're going to do that in our transformation view. Once we've created a transformation view, we can then link that data in that transformation view directly to our modules, our lists, and our hierarchies. And once we've completed that step again, then we can push that data directly into our Anaplan models. Okay, so let's get right into Data Orchestrator. So you can see here, it all starts with our connections. As I mentioned, one of three ways. One, we could create a connection directly to a source system using our pre-built connectors. And this is the list of connectors we have as of right now. Now, the other way to connect, the other two ways are involving either directly from a model. So we're able to push data from one model into another. Currently, you can move data between models in Anaplan, but it's a pull instead of a push. So with ADO, you're going to be able to push that data from one model to another. And the other way is through flat files. So if I wanted to add a new flat file, for instance, I click from file, I give it a name, and I simply tell it where that flat file is located. So what we've done, we've gone ahead and added our flat file for Asia Pacific. So as you can see here, here's that NetSuite data. I'm going to click on it and it'll bring us into our preview screen. So as I come into this, you can see here, I get a preview of the first 100 rows. This is not editable. I can't change anything in here, and for good reason. But I can also get other statistics about the data. I can see the number of rows, the columns, data was created, and I can see where else within ADO that this is being used. So I can see the data map, which we'll see later on, and I can see any transformations that are leveraging this data set. Okay, so we've linked our source data to our flat file. Now we need to get that data into a format that we can push into our models. And that's where we use our transformation views. So I'm going to go into our transformation view, and I'm going to click on the one that we created for our Asia Pacific file. So as I come into our transformation screen, you can see at the top, we have some tools in our tool belt here that we could use to transform that data. We could add new data sources. Think of this as either joining on a table or doing a VLOOKUP to another data source. We could do that. Adding columns, filtering the data. We could also remove duplicate rows directly within this, as well as aggregating that data. We're going to do an aggregation here in just a moment. So as I mentioned earlier, we're trying to get this data into a workable format to push into our models. And there are three basic steps that we needed to do to accomplish this. So the first one revolves around the timestamp. You can see here, we have timestamp, which is giving us year, month, day, and a time. But unfortunately, our model does not use timestamp. Our model is based upon month and year. So we had to actually create a new column just simply by clicking this add column here. And what we did is we used a function in order to get this into the format we wanted. So as I click on this column, you'll notice I have my function editor right here. If I click on it, you can see we're using a function called toChar. And it's saying, take the timestamp column and change it to this format. So the very straightforward, easy to do, and all of the functions are available. If I click this little question mark here, similar to what you would see in Anaplan, all of our functions available for our transformation are right here up on the web. Now, the second thing we had mentioned earlier is that our count format, it wasn't in a format that we could use. We needed to remove one of the dashes. So again, we performed another function on this column, right? You can see here, if I click my editor, I can see I've strung together a few different functions in order to remove that extra space. Again, these are pretty much exactly the same as you could see in Excel. So we're using left, right, and substitute and length as well. Again, we can use very, very simple, or we can go really complex with the formulas, depending on what the need is. Now, one thing I'll note here is that we don't need timestamp or transaction ID in our model. So what we're going to be able to do is perform an aggregation on this data. So what we want to do is aggregate by our month, our account, and our location, okay? So in order to do an aggregation, I'm going to click on the aggregate button here, and I'm going to enable it. So if we start down here at the bottom, the aggregations, as I mentioned, timestamp as well as transaction ID aren't going to be used in our model. So we're just going to do a count on this. This is for those familiar with databases. You can see we have a bunch of functions that we can create on different columns, and then we're just using the count here for these ones. For our actuals, which is our numbers that we're pushing into our model, we're going to sum that together. And then up here, these are going to be the columns that we're grouping by. So I'm going to go ahead and run this aggregation. You can see the calculation runs for just a second here. And then this is our output. So you can see here, let's take this first row, for example. You can see in this 813K, there are 237 different records rolling up into this one line item. Okay, so if I go ahead, and I'm previewing the first 100, but I could preview the first 500 rows. If I look down at the bottom, you can see here, we've taken 10,000 records and reduced that down to 142 rows. So for a customer that's doing this in a data hub, this is just a huge space savings as far as workspace, right? Being able to do this in ADO and not relying on our data hub to do these transformations. Now, one thing I'm going to point out here as well is that in the future, when users are looking at, for instance, this 185,000 in a model, if they were to see that number in a dashboard, they're going to be able to drill back and see the 54 records that go into this 185. So that's just functionality that's going to be able to provide transparency on the numbers that you're looking at. Now, we've linked our data, we've done the transformations. Now we need to tell it where in the model that we want to push the data. I'm going to delete this one as we're going to recreate it. So you can see here, as you may recall, there's two things we need to update. The first one is our hierarchy, okay? So I've already gone ahead and created this one, but I'm going to walk you through the second step, which is we're going to push data into a model, okay? And I'm going to show you how this works by creating a link. I simply need to add my workspace, choose my model. And as I mentioned earlier, ADO understands the underlying structures of our model. So we can see our modules, our lists and hierarchies, it has them all broken out into different categories. Okay, so what we want to do is update our module that contains our actuals. So I'm going to go ahead and just click on this module, which is where we're pushing the data to, and click done. So as you can see here, it brings me back to the previous dashboard. It's saying, okay, you want to push data into this module. Now tell me what data you want to push there. And as I choose my input, we're going to use the transformation we just did on the previous screen. We're going to do that transformation for NetSuite Asia Pacific. So very similar to an import, right? We then just need to map the columns from our transformation to the columns in the module. Now, we have a great feature here called AutoMap, which leverages AI to try to figure out which columns should map. So I'm going to go ahead and run that. And there we have it. So it was able to quickly identify which columns will go to where. It didn't know which one for this GOL2. So I'm going to go ahead and manually change this one. It's going to be my location. So location is going into this. And then now we have all of our columns mapped. You can see the green check mark status here. I hit continue. And then we get a green check mark. So we can see here, we have data ready to push into our hierarchy and our module. So we're going to do this one at a time. Again, we're going to be able to schedule or daisy chain this in workflow to do this. So it runs in the same sequence every time, but I'm going to do this manually for now. So I'm going to go ahead, push that data. You're going to notice down here, we're going to have a status where the wheel is going to turn until this completes. If we get an error here, similar to like imports you would see within Anaplan, we're going to be able to get an error message showing us what the problem was. But this one turned green. You can see it successfully updated our hierarchy. Now we're going to push the data into the module. So I'm going to go ahead, push the data. And as that's running, I'm going to show you the data map, which I had alluded to earlier, and how ADO shows us a map of all of the data going into our various models. So this is the model that we're currently working with. If I click on it, I can see all of the touch points starting from source data here in purple. And then that source data moves into a transformation, which we created that transformation. From that transformation, it's going into our module and our hierarchy here. And again, these are all part of this model. So at any point, if I wanted to see what's happening at any step of this, so for instance, what are we doing in this transformation? If I click on the transformation, it gives me a link and I can go directly into that transformation and view what that, what we're doing here within that. So as you can see down here, I have a green check mark, which means my actuals have been pushed into our model. So now I can go back to my main dashboard. I'm going to go ahead and just reskin this. And as you can see here, now we have our new hierarchy for Asia Pacific. Not only that, we successfully moved that data into our model. So that's ADO. Thank you guys for watching. Have a great day.